The worst thing I've ever had to do in my life was ask my son to come downstairs and tell him that I'd just found child pornography in the house, and ask him whether he'd ever been touched by him. So I was married and I was with my ex-husband for 17 years. So after we split up, I dated a little bit and then I met Pete. My impressions were that he was a gentle giant, just a really beautiful, nature-loving, kind-hearted soul. We saw more and more of each other, and eventually, because we were spending so much time together, we just sort of talked about maybe moving in together. I talked it through with my son, and he was fine with that, and we moved in together. Do you want me to tell you about the day I found what I found? Pete was at work, and I had received a new credit card. And in order to activate the credit card, I had to put it into a card reader. So I went to what was our office. We both used it, and I looked for the card reader. It was normally in the desk drawer, and it wasn't in the desk drawer, which I thought was a bit odd. So I started hunting for this card reader, and there were a couple of boxes and, you know, sort of things in the office, files and all kinds of stuff. And I opened the top of one of the boxes. I noticed that the card reader was in that box too, and I thought, well, that's a really odd place to put it. It's always been in that drawer. Why is it there? Just picked it up and walked out of the office. As I walked out of the office, I looked into the back of it, and there was a small something in where the cards are supposed to go. So I looked closer and thought, it looks like an SD card, the thing that you put into a camera. That's strange. And then suddenly I sort of thought, oh, is he looking at pornography? Oh, God, you know, like you do. So obviously, what actually transpired was not what had even crossed my mind. I took the card out and I just took it into the sitting room, and I put it into the, is it an iPad? Mac, Apple Mac, something like that. I put it into the side, and a little box popped up, and it was a little boy with doing something with a woman, like a really young little blonde-haired boy. So I took the card out immediately because I was so shocked at what I'd seen, and I sort of sat there, probably like I am now, and I just thought, I obviously just didn't see that right. There must have been something else to that. Maybe it's a joke or something, and it morphs into something else. So I sat there for a little while, and then I thought, I've got to put it back in, obviously, because you have to know, don't you? So I put it back in, and lots of titles popped up. And I knew then the titles were just absolutely horrific. I can only remember 2 of them, but I remember just looking down at the titles and thinking, this is just unbelievable. So I just ripped the card out of the laptop, and I actually phoned my tutor because he was a therapist, and I knew that he wouldn't judge or tell anyone, and I knew that he'd know the right thing to do, and I knew what I had to do, but it was as if I needed someone to tell me. He said, "What have you found?" And I said, "I've just seen a video of a really young child doing something with a grown-up woman. And there are other videos, I think, or photos on there, and it's child pornography." And he said, "You know, you need to phone the police, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I just needed to hear someone else say it." So I put the phone down and I phoned the police and told them what I'd found. And she was brilliant. She just said, "We'll send people up." And then, of course, I realised I had to ask my son if he'd ever been touched. So that was the worst thing I've ever had to do in my life, was ask my son to come downstairs and tell him that I'd just found child pornography in the house, and ask him whether he'd ever been touched by him or looked at in the wrong way, or... And luckily he hadn't. Thank goodness. So, of course, then I had to tell him what was going to happen. That any minute now the police were going to show up, and they'd need to come in and ask him lots of questions, and they might have to go through the house. And so then Pete came home, and we just stayed out of sight with our backs to the wall, and I just said, "Don't show him we're in." He was knocking on the door and just sort of saying, "Rosie, Rosie, can you just open the door?" And then he started phoning me. Obviously I didn't answer, but then the police turned up, and we just watched him while he was being arrested. I felt sick. I felt awful for those children. I just felt sick. Couldn't believe that I had been with someone like that. So he spent the night in the cells, and they let him out the next day, and they put something in place that meant he wasn't able to come anywhere near me or my son or the village that we lived in. I just did not know what to do. I didn't sleep. I just wasn't functioning. I was not a functioning human being for at least a week, I would have said. I had the image of that little blonde boy playing almost exactly as I was still looking at the laptop. It would just go everywhere with me, bottom left, and I couldn't get rid of it. The only thing that numbed it a bit was alcohol. So I think for the first 2 weeks, pretty much, I just drank, which was awful for my son, absolutely awful. And he did go off to his father's. And then when I felt I could, I phoned a very close friend who was a therapist and told her everything, and just said to her, I really need help because I just don't know what to do with myself. I don't know how to get the image out of my mind and the thoughts, and I felt so disgusting. I felt so unclean. I think if I could have taken my skin off and bleached it, I would have. Scrubbed it and bleached it, I really would have. I just felt so utterly disgusting. I was anxious about the trial. I was anxious about when it was going to happen. I was anxious about where he was. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know what he was doing. They didn't tell me when the trial was. I found out because somebody messaged me on Facebook saying, I've just seen that Pete got convicted but isn't doing time. Just a really simple message. And I was just a mess, despite the amount of category A pornography he had. He served no time. He got 9 months suspended for 2 years and a fine. I feel that those children are worth more than that. Those children are worth more than that. Moving on was really difficult. Dating again after that is almost impossible. What's the point? Because you're just going to sit there in front of someone and they will probably appear to be really nice, but so did he. It was really hard, and I was kind of pushed by someone to date again. So I did, very loosely. I wasn't overly interested, and I met a really nice guy, and we just started walking our dogs together, and that was it really. We just started walking our dogs together, and I really liked him. After a while, I realised that I really liked him. And 4 years later, he proposed to me. After he proposed to me, I realised how different I felt. And I said to him, I've just realised something, and I owe you such a big apology. I said, I've just realised that for the last 4 years, I've been so shut down. I've been so hard, and I've had so many walls up. I said, I'm so sorry, I just didn't realise. And I knew I'd made the right decision in saying yes when he turned to me and said, I know you have, and I totally understand why.